Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.
Bank of the West is offering the 1% for the Planet checking account. It gives back to the planet at no cost to you, and there's no monthly service charge with any deposit per statement. Only from Bank of the West. Learn more at bankofthewest.com/1%. Additional conditions apply. Member FDIC.
The Bachelorette and Friends. From first love to happy ever after.
What's that?
From dating to dick pics.
Oh my. Oh no!
The Bachelorette and Friends. Oh, I love a good dick.
This podcast contains sexual references, coarse language, and adult themes from the beginning and throughout. It is not recommended for listeners under the age of 15.
Hello and welcome to the Bachelorette and Friends. I'm your host, Carla Anita Matiazzo. And today's guest is a writer of songs and a performer of musical comedy. Welcome to the podcast, Jude Pearl.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Carla. It's so nice to get to talk to you about all these lovely things.
Thank you so much for coming on. Now, before we get into your love life, Jude, I don't know if you remember this, and please don't feel like you need to remember this. But I think it was 2018, I saw you at Gluttony with your show, I Have a Face. I'm pretty sure that's the one that was in 2018.
I think it was a show called Let's Hang Out, because I don't think I've brought I Have a Face. Yeah.
Yes.
And I definitely remember you because you were one of like 3 people that saw the show in the entire season. So of course I remember you.
And then I like sheepishly came up to you afterwards and was like, I loved you. Like in the artists, whatever it was, that artist part of the garden at the back of Gluttony at the time.
Bar?
Yeah, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When it was at the back of Gluttony. Your staff is fucking sick. And then
That's so nice.
And then I saw with Annie Potatoes, Evie Jones and Sam Peterson, I saw you this year at what's the underground one for the Melbourne?
Max Watts or Hi-Fi Bar? Yeah. Oh, cool.
So great. I loved it.
Oh, thanks so much.
It was really brilliant.
Thank you. And honestly, like 2018 Gluttony in Adelaide, just want you to know I love Adelaide. I really love Adelaide, and some of my best friends are from Adelaide. So I just want you to know that. But I have done Adelaide Fringe twice, and both times have been quite brutal. And you giving me a compliment after my show actually kept it. I'm not even joking. It was actually because I really did not have a good run at all. So you saying that nice thing after the show kept me going. So I really appreciate it. So there you go. Of course I remember.
I remember sitting there with the people I came to see it with, and we were all going, this woman needs a bigger audience. What the fuck is going on? And then seeing your show this year at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, I was like, yes, this is the one she deserves. And
that's so nice.
No, it's true. Like seeing you in 2018 and then seeing you this year, I was like, yes, this is where this woman is supposed to be. It was so good. It was so good. That show was really brilliant. I loved how you used your grandma and the voiceovers and then you being like a boy band person. Fucking hilarious. So good, Jude.
Oh, you're too bad. Josh, shucks. You're too kind, Carl. I'm gushing over here. Oh, it's very nice.
It's true. But Jude, seriously, your stuff is so intelligent, so mesmerizing, really brilliant stuff. I can't stress that enough. So anyone listening who hasn't seen Jude or hasn't jumped onto her social medias or whatever to see what she does, you're missing out. Fucking get involved.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Don't even know what to say. Oh, yeah, this is just very nice.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of The Catchalorette and Friends. Make sure you follow the podcast at The Catchalorette Pod on Instagram. And if you think your love journey is worth sharing with me on the podcast, send me an email, thecatchalorettepod@gmail.com, or slide into my Instagram DMs. Oh, and don't forget to give the podcast a review and tell all your motherfucking people to listen to the show. Now let's get back to this episode. Let's get into your love life so that you can feel less awkward after all the compliments.
Yeah, from one awkward thing to like an even more awkward thing of talking about my romantic escapades.
Escapades, I love that word. So good. Do you know what that reminds me of? Sister Act 2. Why does escapades remind me of Sister Act 2?
That is a good question. That's definitely a movie I have seen many, many times.
Yeah. Or maybe Cool Runnings. Why? It's either Cool Runnings or I don't know why.
Something in the early 90s film canon of feel-good movie. I wonder yes. Why does... This is an interesting question. Yeah. I do, yeah. I can think of Sister Act 1 being related to escapades because it's a bit more of, she's the story. I feel like Sister Act 1 has a great story, and then Sister Act 2, they're like, whatever, we'll just get some really good singers in and who cares.
Yeah,
but
that's exactly what it was, yeah.
It's like Sister Act 1 has got the whole, she like witnesses her, spoiler alert, by the way, anyone who hasn't seen Sister Act 1, I'm about to spoil it, but she like sees, Harvey Keitel shoot someone and she has to go into hiding, and it's got a whole, there's a bit more of like action and, and then there's a whole bit at the end when all the nuns are in Reno running around, and it's got a bit of an escapade kind of a vibe, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe that's it. Good job with remembering the name of the dude they got, the mob dude. Well done.
I should have pretended like I had to think about it a bit more. Like, what was this like? As if I don't know every single thing about those movies. I've watched them so many times.
They're so good, though. They're so good.
Yeah, they're so good, and so I love you. Would I think you would appreciate this too as well? But like, I love that era of like the early 90s, like before autotune came in. And it just was like, these people are actually just really good singers. Like that's what's happening here, is that they're just, and then I feel like by the late 90s, and then like shows like Glee, like no disrespect to Glee, but I find, it's very, very auto-tuned, and I find it a little less like invigorating to my soul. Can't connect as much. It's a little too perfect almost or something.
And there's a lot of shit that went down with Glee. Do you know?
Oh, right. I don't know much about what the behind the scenes.
All the shit with like Leah Michelle and how awful she was to the other.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, then much disrespect to Glee.
Yes.
Then I said no
all
disrespect.
The disrespect.
Yeah, like 100% of the disrespect.
Yeah. All of it. Okay, let's get into your crushes. I
keep trying to change the subject.
I can't. That was my fault. I sidestepped us there. Okay. So crushes to me always seems like something that is unattainable. Like I've had crushes even like last year was probably my last crush, Okay. And it seems to be a crush is something that you kind of make up. Well, you do. You make like it's kind of a bit of a fantasy, something that's not necessarily attainable. And then a lot of the time I find when you actually get to know the crush, you're like, oh, you're actually not something I even fucking like. So how did I even get a crush on this thing?
Yeah. That's very relatable what you're saying. I could definitely, I feel like I kind of feel like I had a period of time in my, like probably from around, I don't know, 14 years old to like 19, where I feel like I just had a crush on like every single like guy that I met. Like I just felt there's just like I was like, oh my God, this guy has like shoulders. I'm in love with him. Like there was just that sort of but yeah, like when I look back at some of the people I had a crush on, I'm like, what was I? Why? And I think, you know, you got the hormones and I don't know what it was like for you, Carla, but I was like quite an obnoxious and like, you know, an annoying teenage person. But when it came to romance, sorry?
I don't believe you. I don't believe you.
I feel like I was quite like loud and stuff, but when it came to romance, I was so painfully shy. Like I could not, and I was so terrified of that. Like the longing was there, but I was so scared. I was so scared of it also. So I feel like that just amplified the crushes. So because there was no release. I was just kind of like, I just have all these crushes on all these people and I don't know what to do about it. It's just like a kettle boiling.
Where do you think the fear comes from? Where do you think the fear came from, Jude?
Well, I guess it was like the fear of like putting yourself out there and then getting rejected. Like that was definitely a thing of like, just never know. And just like feeling totally not, I even to this day, I'm like when I was 12 or whatever and people were starting to, you know, like touch each other and do things or whatever, like, you know, and I just remember being like, how does it work? Like, how do you decide? Well, like, it just seemed like people would just do it and figure it out. And I was like, I don't get it. Like, how do you, because I'm such an overthinker, I guess. I was just like, so what do? We kiss? Do we do blah? I mean, how does this, I think, you know, how does this work? You know, and I feel like a bit too thinky and not enough action, you know. Sure. I think that was my...
Sure.
Sorry.
Do you think the patriarchy plays a role there for women a little bit in regards to us not wanting to jump like the gun and be the one to initiate anything because of, you know, fucking Disney, rom-coms, reality TV, all that jazz?
I mean, look, I would be so happy to blame 100% of my problems on the patriarchy. And I say at the very least, partially responsible. So I would not rule that out. And I do think this is going to sound really weird, but like also when I was in year 7 to year 10, which is like, you know, formative hormone years,
fun time.
I was I am glad to never relive that. And I moved to a really religious Jewish school that was there for 4 years. And I found like that it was like this weird thing of, and this is going to come out so weird, but like, I think for like in a very small, like, you know, it's a small community, is a little bit homogenized. Everyone kind of looks and acts similar, at least at that age. And I feel like I kind of just didn't even register as like a female to a lot. Like, I feel like I had a lot of crushes on guys, but I kind of feel like I just didn't seem to have the right, you know, stuff to get the Jewish guys on board. And so and then I moved in year 11 to 12, I moved to this really big, like, artsy school where, you know, like, I basically, as a 17-year-old, like, I looked like Weird Al Yankovic. That's pretty much when I see photos of it, I'm like, I've got the curly triangle hair, big shirt, big, weird, loud shirts. Anyway, so, but even so, I was like, actually got male attention, and it was very kind of like, oh, I think I don't have what the Jewish guys need. So I feel like I spent those 4 years just kind of going like, how do I get these Jewish guys to pay attention to me? It's such a specific problem that I'm describing. Like, I don't think anyone would relate to this very much.
No, it's really good because I started watching, must be on Netflix. I think it's on Netflix or Stan. And it's about this family. The mother left the Orthodox, I can't remember which strand of Judaism it is, but it was a very Orthodox, in America, a very Orthodox strand. And she's now running like $1 million modeling company or something, like a higher.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember what it's called. Anywho, so she's denounced Judaism completely, and so has her youngest daughter, but her youngest son is still in between her ex-husband and her, like he's still in shared houses. And then her eldest daughter got married at 19 and is still married to somebody who's quite still under that banner. And
very religious.
Yes, yeah. And the eldest daughter who got married at 19 is now transitioning out of the religion. And she walked into the kitchen in a pair of jeans. And apparently women aren't allowed to wear pants. And he was very, very outraged, and it would bring shame to his family and all that kind of stuff. And I thought what you were saying there about you weren't giving the Jewish boys what they needed, like the first thing that came into my head. You start wearing pants and then it was all over. Like
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Like I was really curious and interested to see how, you know, part of part of the family was moving away from the religion, and then part of the family was still in it, and the conflicts that was causing. I just thought that's what popped into my mind when you said that.
Yeah. I feel like I have heard about this show, and I can't remember what it's called either, but it does. There's and the school that I went to was quite religious. So it was like, you know, girls always had to be wearing skirts or dress. Like, so even when we had sport, we always had to wear like a netball skirt over our, you know, like sport pants or whatever. Like, you know, so it was just like, and all kinds of stuff like that. So,
wow.
And I mean, look, it's a combination of also being like, when I was there, it was also like the worst possible age in terms of, you know, like your self-doubt and insecurity and everything. But it's sort of a weird, that thing of like, even now I'm a bit like, I always want to have some connection to that community, but I also feel so not like I don't really fit in that. It's such a, you know, there's lots of subgroups of like, you know, there's not just like one Jewish community, but it's like, just sort of always feeling like I don't feel like I fully fit in here, which is weird because like I grew up so Jewish that it's like you would think that if there was one group of people that you would fit in with, it would be like that. But
do you think that's because you're an artist, Jude? Do you think that's you're an artist? Because I feel like a lot of artists feel like they don't necessarily fit anywhere neat and tidy. Do you know what I mean? We don't fit into a box.
I think that that's definitely a part of it. Or just being, especially with, again, that school was so academic, and like, you know, I always was like really struggling with all of the only subjects that I seemed to be, you know, good at were like music and art, and like occasionally I would fluke a math test and get like, you know, a B or something. And so I feel like even just that thing of there is and this is just to clarify, this isn't like this is again a very specific Jewish community within Melbourne. It's not like the whole community in general, but it's like this particular community, it does feel like there's a real like, here's your path, like, you know, lawyer, doctor, accountant, like engineer. And you know, and even if I wanted to do those things, I definitely did not have the academic aptitude for, like I wouldn't have been able to do it anyway. And but yeah, so I think that probably also combined with it, like just it being a really a very academic school and not fitting in with that stuff. But yeah, it was also very, like we had like 4 Jewish study subjects a day, so it was like it's like Jewish like very, there was no messing around. Like this is like someone once asked
really
me like
cool though, like look, like from me as an outsider, I would have loved to have gone to a school where there was 4 subjects a day of Italian shit. I would have loved that.
Looking back, I feel like there is a lot of really interesting stuff there, but I think also that it, you know, is taught in a, like, being at the age of being like, I can't think of anywhere I would rather be less than in like a Jewish studies class right now. But like, yeah, I think, so I probably didn't appreciate that stuff very much, but it was also, you know, there is so much just kind of like, it's that kind of conflict thing with like your culture and identity where it's like, there are parts of the Jewish stuff that I'm like, that's really cool. And then there are parts of like religion that are just so fucked. You're just like, that is like, we would learn about stuff. I'm like, that's horrible. Like that is really bad. And maybe we could update some of this stuff, you know? So it's like that.
Did you ever say that?
I don't know if I would have said it in that way, but I'm sure that I would have made my angsty feelings known in some respect. Like
awesome.
Like yeah. So it's this weird, you know, like a conflicting, you know, these like there are parts that are cool about it and interesting, and there are parts that you're like, oh, that's just actually homophobic, you know, or whatever, you know. That's So,
wow.
Yeah. So. Anyway, but the only reason I brought that up though is that it was like I just never got a lot of love from the Jewish guys. I don't know. I just never did it for them. I don't know.
They're lost, Jude. They're lost.
Yeah. Look at me now.
Look at you now. So going to the art school, you said that you got boy attention, yeah? Because you were in art school, you're being yourself, you were able to be accepted for who you are.
Yeah.
So give us a scenario of some boy time at that art school.
Well, I think it was even just like the fact that just noticing that like guys talking to me in a different way. Like I'm not basically like when you go from 0 to anything, it feels like it's 100% improvement. So it's not like I was getting, you know, I was still the, you know, the best friend character that like would help my friends with their man troubles and be like, you know, I don't really have any advice because I don't know anything. But but I'll be like your, you know, like Bonnie Hunt in a movie or something, you know, so like I'll be like that character. That's cool with me. But so I guess it was just like even just noticing that there were some guys that particularly in the drama arena, I feel like it was
very
like
handsy and stuff, and the experimental in drama.
Yes, and I think like obviously I didn't know it at the time, but just feeling like, you know, the sort of inclination towards just like the queer community as well. Like even though I'm like so like I'm not proud of it, but I'm just so like attracted to dicks that it's like, but I know that like gender wise, you know, I feel in that sort of like gender non-conforming space, but it's like, I know, you know,
you're not proud of.
Sorry, I did not explain that. I mean, like physically, I like the, you know, I'm like very attracted to what is generally referred to as the male anatomy, but I understand now that, you know, there are people who have dicks who are not male, but you know, anyway, all I was trying to, but I just knew that. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. It's just it's okay. You don't have to feel shame for liking the penis. It's okay.
I know. I don't know what I shouldn't. I just was like, just why do I like it so much? It's just, I don't understand. But you don't have, that's what's beautiful about it, is you don't have to understand why you like something.
Yes.
But I just meant like, you know, I still felt this kind of not knowing what it was then, but being like, oh, I feel much more comfortable around, you know, the LGBT community and the drama club, like kids that was very open about all that stuff. So yeah, I feel like just being around that group of people also just helped me kind of, like just noticing that like, oh, people like are more open about this stuff, and I don't have to, you know, like straighten my hair and be really skinny to be like attractive or something like that. I don't know if any of what I'm saying is making sense, but no,
I get it. I get what you're saying. It's really difficult, I think, for us ethnics, Jude, because the ethnic woman is not like the general stereotype of an ethnic woman.
Yeah.
Not like we've got curves, we got stuff. We're never going to, like the bean pole that we've been fed throughout our existence. The teenagers, we were expected to achieve the androgynous, really skinny, twiggy look. That's what, and we're still fed that to a lot of respects as well, but it is changing.
Sure. Yeah.
It's changing.
Yeah, it's nice actually just seeing that. I think a lot of people talk about what sucks about social media, and I agree there's a lot of things that suck about it. But I think something that is really cool is that you can find things you need to find. Like, you know, you can look up, if I want to look up, you know, people who are not like all that homogenous, like they look the same, and that, you know, I can actually find different people of different sizes or different backgrounds or whatever, you know, so you can actually see that you're not weird for being, you know, what you are or something.
Yes. Yeah. And it's interesting, maybe it's because we live in Australia, maybe for a certain period of time that there was an aesthetic that we were all pressured to aspire to, because I'm pretty sure if we lived in Europe that wouldn't have been a thing. Yeah, totally. Yeah, if you're kind of, that's a really good point. And I've not been to like that part of Europe, so I wouldn't know. Have you sort of gone to Italy and yeah. And you feel like it's a different vibe in terms of that stuff? Like, that's awesome. Yeah, I definitely felt you know, when you go to places that you haven't been before and you feel like you've been there. There was a lot of that stuff happening in a few different parts of Italy, and because my family's also from the northern parts of Italy, and when it was Croatia, now it's Yugoslavia, now it's called Croatia, and France. So there was definitely, when I was in Italy and France in particular, there was definitely places where I was like, I feel like I've been here before, but
that's so cool.
And I think, and at the end of the day though, Jude, really no one is paying that much attention to how we look than we think they are.
Totally. Yeah, and just generally no one's paying attention to you that much anyway. Like, just, you know, the whole, like, when you worry about things that you've said, and it's like, no one cares. Like, I
cannot tell you the amount of times that I say something, especially when it's a new group of people, when I'm trying to make a delightful impression and I'm around a new group of people and I'm trying to be witty or funny, and I'll say something and it'll land wrong. I will, months later, it will still be popping up into my mind and go, oh, but I didn't mean it like that. And it came out like, and there was fucking shit. And and they wouldn't even remember.
Oh, they wouldn't. Yeah. Have you ever been sort of thinking like, I might just message them and clarify what I said, and then hopefully you have enough. Like, usually, whether it's an actual other person or another part of me going like, don't be ridiculous. Like, what are you doing? Like, they just be like, I don't even remember you.
Yeah. I think I have. Like, I think there are so many times where I either go to message to like absolve me from the guilt that I'm carrying from what I've said, or literally wait until I see that person next time and go, okay, before we get into anything else, I know I said this last time and I really want to, unpack that and apologize and make sure you understand that that's not, oh my God, Jude.
Yeah. Listen, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you, Carla. I know exactly what you're talking about a little too well.
And do you think, especially when it comes to people that you like, use a 90s phrase, when you're in those early stages of like courtship or whatever, have you ever found yourself over-analysing something that you've said in those scenarios? Because that feels like a higher pressure cooker than the general conversation with somebody you're not trying to bed,
Yes. Yeah. Oh, listen. Have I ever overanalyzed a situation with someone that I like? Yeah. But you know what's like really nice is that I feel like as I've gotten older that like, even though most of it I know is my own neuroses, but also these things are like a two-way. Interactions are always like a two-way thing. Like there's always, each person bringing something to the dynamic.
Yeah.
And I did notice, and this is again that thing that happened like when I moved to a big artsy school and I was just around more people, and also just as I've gotten older, and you start to like notice that there are some people that whether they mean to or not, they kind of just like look at you a bit weird after you've said something, and then you kind of go, oh my God, did I say something weird? And then you meet people who are just like, don't do that, and they're just kind of like they're on board whatever or they'll just be like, no, it's cool, like that's fine, and you're like, oh, it's fine. And there are people out there, Carla, that will like take us for who we are.
Yes.
And it's just a really beautiful thing that
isn't it refreshing?
They do exist. Yeah, they don't just kind of look at you bewildered like, what are you saying? And you're like, oh my God, they're doing that thing where they look at me. I better keep talking more
to cover it up
faster. Yeah, to cover it up. Yeah, I'll just talk my way right out of this situation.
Yeah. So that's a really good point there. I think when the people that you are conversing with are the people that are making the faces and looking at you like you're speaking another language, that's probably a good, clear indication that they're probably not. But in saying that, it is sometimes alarming and polarizing when you don't get the perplexed, puzzled look, because we're so used to having people look at, like, from what you're saying. So when you do meet people like-minded, on the same page, loving you for who you are, seeing you for who you are, it's like, hang on, what?
Yeah. It's like, is it kind of like, wait, what's wrong with you that you're like me?
Yes.
But then I know what you're talking about. It's that whole, like, I don't want to be part of a club that would have me as a member sort of mentality. Like, but also I think that there are some people that are just like, they get it and they go like, okay, you're on a thing right now. And they're just like, oh, I'm here when you're done. Like, you can just go on your rant, but like, it's all good, and they don't, but it is, I think a lot of time people don't realize that they're doing it, that they're just kind of looking at you like you're speaking, like he's, you're speaking another language, or you're just kind of talking crap. Even if you are, talking crap, you don't want people to look at you like you're talking crap. It's like,
what is the best date you have been on and why?
Well, it's kind of related to this. What we're talking about is, I feel so much more comfortable talking about like shitty, like lame things that have happened with dating. It's like really uncomfortable talking about like nice things. I'm like, because I don't want to be one of those people that's like, we just have this like perfect, like everything's like so great, we're perfect, and you're like, cool, that's boring. So my current partner, like when we we sort of met, like we'd known each other for a while, we played weddings and stuff together, like in wedding bands, and
Cute.
you wouldn't think this, but actually not a romantic setting to meet someone playing weddings. But it was just really, but you know, it was fun working with them. But we would like, I think we were sort of talking and just, you know, that thing of like, hey, we should catch up outside of weddings. And then we went, and then we were like, oh, let's, you know, go for dinner or something. And then he told me the address that we were going to meet, and I went there, and it was like this really like just shitty looking, like, you know, when you're like on a street that looks residential and then there's like one shop on the street, and you're like, why is there a residential shop? And it was like this really crappy looking takeaway pizza place. So I was like, I guess, you know, I'm not a flashy girl. I don't need a lot, but I was like, this doesn't look like a cool, nice place to hang out for, you know, an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And then like he was calling me and he was like, oh, whereabouts are you? And I'm like, I'm at the place. And then he's like, I'll just, you know, he figured out where I was and he came and got me, and then he picked me up and he's like, oh, you must have just been like, what the fuck? Like, why did you say to meet here? And then we went to like another place that was very nice. And it was a lot of just me talking a lot of crap and him looking at me like I wasn't crazy. So it was like a really, everything that I could ever want from a date. So
that's nice. It does end up being the company, not necessarily what you are doing, that makes the difference. So how did you go from friends to hanging out to being your boyfriend? How did that all happen?
It's like, I think we did a wedding together, and like I had just had hand surgery. So I had like, my hand was like in a weird splint, and I wasn't playing keyboard. I was just singing on the gig. And he was like, oh, what happened? And I said, oh, like I've just had like the worst couple of months. Like I've had hand surgery and like got all these stomach problems. And also like, you know, my boyfriend of 6 years and I just broke up. And I think he was just like a bit like, sorry about that stuff. But also I think it was a bit of a like, oh, okay, maybe we should hang out then. Like he not said so explicitly, but I think like I think we were both crushing on each other from afar for a while. And then he was like, this sounds really Netflix and chill, but it was actually just Netflix and chill. And what we didn't like hook up, you know, straight away, but it was like he was like, you just should come over and like watch a movie or something. Yeah. And we watched American Beauty, which, you know, was fine at the time. It was fine to watch it because like the Kevin Spacey thing hadn't happened yet. Yes. So at the time it was just like, oh, what a great movie. And, you know, now obviously, But and I think because we both were working on weekends. So it was kind of like, let's like hang out after, you know, we don't go to sleep after gigs for a couple hours. So like, let's just hang out and watch the movies. And
well, that's nice. Having somebody in the same industry, Jude, the entertainment industry, I think there are unwritten, not rules, but things that other people don't really understand that makes things easier between a couple that are both in the entertainment industry. You don't have to explain the nitty-gritty and explain yourself as to why certain things are the way they are, or you're doing certain things or whatever. Yeah, it makes it a little bit easier.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and he's also like a songwriter, like, you know, has his own original project and is a songwriter as well. So I think there's a lot of, which like for a long time I would have thought, you know, don't be with someone that plays the same instrument as you, because I think but you know, but I think I'm sure that would be fine for some people. But like, I think you're right. Like I feel like every relationship, you know, my like last 3 relationships are all with the musicians, and I was always like, every time I was like, don't date another musician. I just need like a normal person. And then I'm like, I can't be, I'm not a normal person. So
it's interesting. It's really interesting because I had gone the other way. The relationships I've had as an adult, they have not been creative at all until the man I'm with now, who is very creative. And I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I just come to this conclusion earlier? What the fuck? Yeah.
What does your partner do?
He's a stand-up and an artist.
Oh wow, cool. It is sort of, and it's funny though, like I can see both sides of the art. Like I know people who are, creative types who have partners who are like very much not creatives. And I can see that really works for, like, I think that for some people having the separation is really good. Like or even, I think for me, it's like exactly what you said, where it's like, I don't want to have to explain why I'm crazy in this particular way. I just need you to understand why I'm like this. And so
for an example, like leading up to a new show, I get tense. Like if I've put a new show together and it's literally about to go on stage for the first time, at least example, it's on for a full run of the Adelaide Fringe. The first at least 3 shows, probably a couple of hours before the show, I'm a bit tense and I probably don't want to talk to anybody. Like it's
for sure.
Like I'm trying to whereas I know in the past I've had to explain that and it hasn't gone down well. Like I've given previous relationship dudes a heads up, like, okay, this is kind of what happened, so you can either just leave me alone or bear with me or whatever. But even with prefacing it and giving them forewarning of what I know, because I just go into my head when it's new show, when it's a show I've been doing for a couple of years, it doesn't matter. You can talk to me right up until I walk on stage. I don't care because I'm comfortable with it. There's, different level of it's just I have a different level of confidence in my ability of the material. Whereas I don't have to explain that anymore because he's exactly the same way. And I can see the mannerisms and the anxiety a little bit that rises within him too just before he has to perform. And I get it. And I don't in the past, it has been taken personally by whoever I've been with. Yeah. But it's actually got nothing to do with them, it's,
And it's, and there's I'm sure that when you would explain it to them, they'd be like, I get it. But it's like, it's not, there's a difference between understanding something like cerebrally and like understanding something like in your being. Like it's kind of, it reminds me of trying to explain anxiety it surprises me that some people don't have anxiety. I don't fully understand that, but apparently it's a thing. It's like trying to explain depression or anxiety to someone that doesn't have it. It's like you can be like, okay, I understand what you're saying, but if they don't experience it, they're not going to understand. It's like anything, it's like, so I think it does, not having to constantly especially when it's something tricky that and it's very understandable getting nervous before a show. I think most, if not all, performers have that. And so it's it's like you don't want to have to be thinking about someone taking that personally when you're already
I literally just go quiet. I go introverted. And because I'm usually quite a chatty, bubbly, loud, talkative person, usually me going quiet is opposite to the usual situation. And I guess that's why it can be taken personally. But something my mum used to do is she used to picking fights just before I'd perform, because she knew the state in which I was with, and she'd always, I don't have a relationship with my mum anymore. That's another
Right.
story. Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
that's another story. But she used to, it would be like clockwork. As soon as I'd be getting ready to go and perform, like I'd be fine if I was just singing for like a wedding band or whatever it was. But when it's material that I've created, like an hour show that I'm putting on for something,
sure.
that's different. That's just a different thing. But it was like clockwork. She would pick like the time when my anxiety started to bubble, and then she'd be talking to me about stuff that actually doesn't need to be spoken about before like it just doesn't. And then there'd always be an argument, and then there'd always be oh, Carla, you're so difficult. I'm like, but I didn't engage. I didn't start this conversation. Like I didn't, like, you know, that I get anxious and you know I go quiet, and then you come and fight. This is obviously when I was living with them, or when she'd often offer to drive me to a gig, and I was like, I got to a stage where I was like, I'll see you at the gig. Please, I know you. No, like, no.
Yeah, it's like almost sounds like kind of, you know, someone who's seeking out drama, trying to like, and knowing that you're in a kind of a sensitive, you know, place right before you go on, and being like, now's my chance.
Yeah. And she was very good at the gaslighting situation. She was very, she was one of those. Before gaslighting was like a term that I knew. And always the victim in the story, even though plenty of times she would be lighting the fire. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, totally. Oh man. Yeah. That is like the last thing that you want to have when you're about to go on. So just like weird, gaslighty drama. That's.
Have you ever had relationships, Jude, where there's been a competitiveness to it, seeing as they've all been performers?
I think there was, I feel like maybe in a way, yes, but like I think that I've had relationships with people where I feel like there's, you know, a bit of a chip on their shoulder about maybe they've had it harder than me, which like they, you know, in a lot of ways they have. But I think that sort of seem to conflate to like, you know, the reason that you're doing good stuff, like, or that you're able to do the things that you do is because like your parents have been supportive of you, like kind of thing, which is a factor. I'm not denying that it is a fact, but yeah, I think it's like there's a difference between acknowledging privileges and stuff and to just being like, you know, kind of trying to tear down your partner, you know,
and sabotage them. Yeah.
But it wasn't like, I think it was more like a grumbly, it wasn't anything really overt, but it was just, you know, definitely things mentioned a lot. And, you know, again, not to like harp on about the Jewish thing, because I know I've talked about it a lot, but I think there is, there's like, I think that some, you know, I've like, might not be surprising to hear from what I said before. I've never been in a relationship with a Jewish person, but like I think there sometimes is a little bit of a like, you know, people conflate Jewish to being like affluent, and it's like, it's a little bit of a, you know, there's a bit to unpack there, you know, and it's like this sort of, I think, an assumption that, that, you know, because you're Jewish, that maybe certain things are easy. And I think at the time I didn't really clock a lot of that, but like looking back, I'm like, oh, maybe that would have been something I should have tried a little bit to address, but it's nothing like really overt. But I guess that it's not really competition, but I think just a little bit of like, oh, well, maybe the reason that you're doing better than me at this is because of, Also very hard to remember, like, that the relationships I'm thinking about are so long ago now that it's like, it's you sort of wonder if your memory kind of
Serves you
adjusts
well.
things.
Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, I'm sure that I was doing things that were like, you know, you like every relationship you learn a little bit more about what like not to do and what, you know, I think probably one of my biggest issues in relationships was like just, I think being like, you know, needing more than maybe what was like fair, or like, you know, like probably not having a full handle on some of my like mental health stuff, and probably expecting a partner to kind of just like
Fill that void.
Yeah. Not really getting that, like, oh, this isn't that's actually not their issue. This is your issue. And sort of, I think that, so like, you know, especially those earlier relationships, I feel like everyone's just kind of like flying blind a little bit, and you're feeling things out, and you just, you know,
and you're working things out. I think that's very important. You know, so as a teenager or a young adult, the pressure that can be within ethnic communities that the person that you're with is the person that you're going to die with, I think that's still around. Like, that's still around. And thank fuck I didn't buy into that, because I think I would have not learnt the lessons that I have learnt or needed to have learned, and the importance of working yourself out to a certain extent is very important. Even though we evolve through time, that's, you know, life experience makes us change, makes us evolve. Some people refuse to go with the evolution of their life, and they say stay stuck. But I think, look, every journey is different, right? Everybody's different. Everybody learns different things or chooses not to learn things. But I would be remiss in thinking, like, for a long time I thought I was a failure because I wasn't in a long-term relationship. So my brother was in a long-term relationship from the age of 15 to 23. So they were together for a long time. And often my dad in particular would use that as an example, and for me, and why can't I? Well, can't you keep a man? You know, this kind of... man. Yeah. My dad's a pretty excellent dude, but that was, you know, for a split second there when that world looked perfect, it was very much a comparison. And I'm so glad that I didn't fall into that pressure, because just, I think I would have been a very miserable motherfucker if, you know, I did. Yeah.
It's really, I'm always really fascinated to hear like when people can break out of, because it's like, it feels like with, you know, with the ethnic thing as well, it's not just your family, it's like a community. It's like, so you're not just kind of you're not just getting your information from your immediate family. It's kind of from this greater, you know, community that all seems to have similar values and views on things.
Complex.
Super
unpack.
Totally. So I'm always like really fascinated with people who have had that experience, that kind of go, actually this isn't right for me, and are able to sort of break out of that, because I think it's surprisingly difficult to, like, you know, break out of your like what you've kind of been surrounded by for your whole life. So that's really cool that you were able to go, despite like your dad saying like, why can't you keep a man?
Like, look, as I said, he's a pretty excellent dude, but there's definite moments with that stuff where I reflect back and go, people's worldview can change very quickly. Like he wouldn't make those comments now. Like,
oh, cool.
Yeah. So Dad's had his own experiences that have made him reflect. And there's no way that he would do that now, because he knows sometimes relationships end and it's out of your hands. Like it's not really something necessarily that you can fully take full responsibility for and completely blame yourself. And it's interesting when you've got different generations, even though you were saying, Jude, within that community, when there are different generations that have got different perspectives, and sometimes the different generations surprise you. And I think I've mentioned this in previous episodes before. My dad's side of the family, whose parents both came from Italy later in life in their 20s, had Nonna Anna had a very much more open perspective, and whatever boyfriend, because I've only had, well, now 3, but at the time when she was still alive, I only had 2 boyfriends, and she met them and she was like, they're not good enough for you. These are not the right. Like both times she was like, nah, these boys aren't good enough for you, right? But then I had my nonna on the other side, who's been living in Australia since she was a little girl, and she was putting the pressure on to stick with them.
Oh, right,
with them, because I wasn't married, I didn't have kids, and a woman only has value when she's married with children. And you'd think it'd be the opposite way round, that the woman that came from Italy later would have those old views, and the woman that lived here in Australia would have the opposite. Like it's very, very interesting. And then on mum's side with the nonna that was like, no, stick with it because you only have value if you are connected and making babies. Then her daughter, my mother, was the biggest failure you'll ever do is if you're a mother and you're a wife. Like those things from like one side, like it's just a lot.
Yeah, totally. And it just shows you that like you know, I like how you said like you sort of can get surprised by, you know, we sort of think different generations like all think the same thing, and it's like no, like it is really complicated, and it is like it's I think it's good to recognize that like there are these they're just implanted, the thoughts about what our value is, it's just like implanted in us, and that it doesn't, I think like the best for, I don't know what it's like for you, but for me, like the best thing was just meeting, because like I've kind of always known that I didn't want to have kids. I just sort of knew that from a really young age, and I didn't know that you were allowed to think that. I didn't know that that was even a possibility. I was like, so as a kid, I was like, oh, I better, this is a pretty like mess up thought for a kid to be having, but I was like, well, I better, you know, like at 6 years old, I'm like, all right, I better just make sure I do all the fun things I need to do before I have kids, because then I'm going to have kids, and then it's, you know, and I don't know how that thought got in, but it did. And then like when I was 20 or 21, I was talking to like a really good friend of mine who was about, 7, 8 years older than me, and she had been married for a while, and I just asked if like they were gonna, like if she wanted to have kids or whatever, and she's like, no, we're just not gonna do it, we're just not gonna have kids. And it was like my brain just went, what? I was like, what? You can do that? That's so cool that you can do that. I didn't know that you could. Yeah. And it was like, just, I feel like the more you see different things, the more you're like, oh, these are all viable options, like, you know, that's these right. And so I think that's like, for me, that has been the best way of just seeing different, like the same thing, like seeing different body types, seeing different lifestyles, seeing, you know, whatever it is, and like just going or even the first time I saw somebody with the pronouns like she and they, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't know you could combine them. Like, that's so crazy. Like, that's awesome. You know, it's like, you have to kind of see it to sort of know that it's even possible, I guess. Well, yeah. So
that's so important. I love that story. That's really good. I love that just story.
Like weight lifted off my shoulders.
It's an interesting thing though. As a little girl, you're thinking, I've got to get all the fun stuff done before I have a kid. what I've loved recently is seeing all my creative friends that are parents able to still do all the fun stuff and still do all like this thing that we're fed often as women, and in particularly ethnic women, I think, because there's a lot of nurturing that's involved when you're like, it seems to be, from my experience, like a heightened version of mother in inverted commas. I'm so grateful that I am seeing people around me that have babies, that take the babies on tour with them, that are able, yes, it's hard and it's a juggling act and you've got to be organised, but you're able to do it. Whereas I did have that thing too. Okay, I've got to do all the things and achieve all the things before I procreate because my life is over when that happens. It's not, I want to be like, one day I do hope to have a kid and I want to be that mum that is the example that you can do. But it is hard as a woman. There is an expectation of balance and it is shifting. That the weight is more on the woman to create that balance, whereas it seems easier in some respects for dudes to just pack up and go without the... Do you know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Totally. Yeah. Absolutely. And I agree. Like, I think it is changing and hopefully will continue to change. Yes. But it's like,
evolve.
I think even just the idea of like, I think that also what people need to really keep in mind as well is that the idea of like, you know, the 1950s, the one income supporting a family of 4 or 5 is like, I don't think that exists anymore.
Unless you're like a billionaire, yeah,
unless you're a Jeff Bezos or you know, like it just doesn't seem to. It's kind of like I think, and sometimes I feel like, and this is coming from someone who is not parenting is not on my radar at all, but I get the sense that like people feel there's a sense of. Not necessarily failure, but like if they're like, oh my God, why can't I figure out how to make this work-life balance
work together?
Yeah,
we're getting fed a false sense in particular via Instagram of that everything is easy. You can do everything and nothing is a struggle. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And I imagine there's a whole, with parenting, there's just a whole lot of that sort of stuff, like people presenting a certain thing that is so not realistic and
correct.
But hopefully, you know, more and more people are acknowledging that it's like, no, it's not easy. And there is like, you do have to make sacrifices to make this work. Like you can't literally have everything all the time, but you can like make it work. But it you know, it comes with a whole other, you know, it's like juggling a bunch of different things. I don't know. I'm also saying all this as someone who like is not a parent when no,
but neither am I. But sacrificing, and this can be our last a little bit of wisdom for whoever's listening. Making sacrifices is something that is part and parcel of a relationship anyway.
True. Yeah, absolutely.
You're not going to get everything you want. You're not going to get, you have to compromise to some extent. And sometimes one person is compromising more than the other person. And hopefully it should ebb and flow, but sometimes it does not.
Yeah. You make a good point there, Carla. It's true. And and it's funny as well, like that thing of, like the sacrifice thing, but also, you know, because I know I was mentioning with sort of previous relationships feeling like, you know, that I probably needed more than I was able to get, which is like partly me, you know, not dealing with my own stuff properly. But also what's interesting as well is like, because my current partner is a single dad and he has like 2, you know, teenage kids, and like they are sort of, they spend most of the week with him and like their mom's on the weekend. But it's like, it's funny how like on paper you would think single dad, like, because when I first started hanging out with him, I was a bit like, what am I doing? Like, this is so, like, I wasn't able to get the things that I needed from like previous partners who like, you know, were living with their parents and like, you know, it is. And, but it's sort of, you also, it's going to sound really cheesy, and I'm sorry to end on so cheesy, but I think like it's not a sacrifice when it's maybe a person that's right for you. You know what I mean? Like it's, and so a single dad has been able to give me more time than, you know, it's like than someone who didn't have any kids. So it's like, I don't know if I'm making my point very clearly, but basically it's like it's also about the individual person and like if they're making it sound like it's a compromise all the time, you know, maybe it's not like something else isn't working or like if it's always having to be this fighting for compromise and especially when there are no kids involved, like, you know, I don't know. I don't really know what I'm sort of, hopefully that was something.
You were so dancing around the fact that you were gushing over your boyfriend. You're like, no, I'm a tough woman. I'm not going to gush over my man. I'm not going to do that. It's okay. You're allowed to gush. I get it. I totally get it.
For me, it's like I've sort of come along when they're basically the kids are all grown anyway. And I'm like, I can give you guys lifts if you want, but, you know, I'm not really, you know, I don't have very much responsibility, which is works great for me. I get to be the really self-involved one. So it's also, it's good. It's working out. It's working out great.
You can bring the glitter and the joy and that's your responsibility. That's it. That's all you got to do. That's it. Do you have any parting words of wisdom to leave us with today, Jude?
Just that, you know, if you don't want to have kids, don't have kids. I don't know. No, that's if you feel like people look at you weird when you talk a lot, just there will be someone out there that gets it. You know, there will, and you deserve to find those people that get that you're particular kind of crazy, and they do exist, even if you haven't met them yet. Just branch out.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Jude, for your time today. It has been splendid.
Thank you so much for having me. I just talked right over your thank you. I was like, thank you for having me. It's very nice to finally get to talk to you, and hopefully I get to see you in person at some point soon.
Yeah. Fingers crossed Melbourne Fringe happens. My show is supposed to come to Melbourne Fringe.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Hopefully. Well, I will keep an eye out for that. That would be great to see you.
Thanks, babe. Thank you so much for coming on, Jude. It's been great.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Carla.
The Catch-A-Lorette with friends near and far, from heartache to catfish and sex toys. The Catch-A-Lorette and friends. See you next time, if you dare.
Bank of the West is offering the 1% for the Planet checking account. It gives back 1% of the account's net revenue to the planet at no cost to you. There's no monthly service charge with any deposit per statement, and there's no minimum balance required. The 1% for the Planet checking account, only from Bank of the West. Learn more at bankofthewest.com/1%. Additional conditions apply. Member FDIC.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.